Welcome to part 39, Dash Summary. Now that we've completed our application, I wanted to do one more video on Dash and all the things that we've done with it. So let's begin up here with Dash versus Plotly. So Dash is the library that builds the dashboard application with HTML components and provides interactivity with callback functions. Dash does not do visualization. It is Plotly that creates them. But for these Plotly visualizations to appear in our dashboard, they have to be placed in this dcc.graph component. There are two parts to a Dash application, the layout and the interactivity. The layout holds the components of the dashboard, and then the interactivity controls what happens to those components whenever an event is triggered. Okay, so let's talk about some of the libraries that have components that will go into the layout. So the Dash HTML components library is aliased as HTML. It contains those standard HTML elements with their class names are the same as the element names, except that they are capitalized. The first parameter that you pass to these classes is the content of the element. You can also provide the ID in class with the ID and class name parameters. You can also provide the CSS with the style parameter, but typically this is better to do in a CSS file, which can be located in the assets directory. Now the Dash core components library is aliased as DCC and has more complex components, many more widgets that bundle together, lots of HTML, CSS, and JavaScript together into a single component, such as drop-down menus, radio buttons, tabs, and many more. So one of these is that dcc.graph component, which is used to hold those Plotly figures. Another library is this Dash data tables library. So when we import that, we'll use the data table class in order to create these interactive tables of data. One thing that you have to do to prepare the data is to take your data frame and convert it to a list of dictionaries with this toDict method. So you can't pass the data frame itself. And then you can style. There are many different parameters for the data table, but many of them begin with style underscore and then the name of what you're styling. So either the table, the cell, the headers, or the data itself. So lots of stuff to customize your data table. The Dash Bootstrap Components library is a third-party library, meaning that it's not created by Dash itself. It is separate. You have to download it, install it separately. It's aliased as DBC, and it has many extra components that are not provided by Dash core components. Now to style it, you do have to provide this external style sheets parameter in the Dash constructor and then link it to a particular style sheet or whatever flavor of Bootstrap you want. So that's how you gain the power of Bootstrap, is by actually linking the Bootstrap CSS in with this parameter. Okay, so this wraps up the components part that we talked about that go into the layout of a Dash application. Now a little bit on the callback functions. So these have to happen after app.layout is set. The function names and parameters are arbitrary. They can be whatever you want. But each function must be decorated with this app.callback method. So that has to decorate the functions. And what's passed to this app.callback is a list of the outputs, inputs, and states. And to formally, declare these outputs, inputs, and states, you use the output, input, and state classes from this dash.dependencies module. And the way you invoke these is to pass them two arguments. The first is the ID of the component that you're targeting. And then it's the property of that component that you want the value of. So it's ultimately that will either be set as an output or it'll be passed into your function as an input. Okay, so the function must return a value for each of the input or for each of the outputs. So if you want to change, if you have 3 outputs, then it needs to return 3 different values. Now sometimes you don't want any update to happen even though the function is triggered. And the way to do this is to raise this exception, this prevent update exception. And with our application, this happened whenever a user clicked in the data table but did not click a country name. They clicked somewhere else in a different column. And so we prevented the update by raising this particular exception. All right, so one thing that's important to note is that every callback that you create will be called whenever the app first launches. So you have to be aware of that. And then another limitation is that each component may appear as an output in exactly one callback. So you can't have multiple callbacks that all reference the same output. You have to figure out a way to have one callback function or just have your output in a single callback function. And so we had to kind of use some logic to combine together lots of different inputs because we had an output that changed based on different inputs for our application. Yeah, so that's what we did right here. Now the opposite is, or for inputs, each component may appear as an input in any number of callbacks. Okay, so those are basically all the things that we covered in Dash, and hopefully this helped hopefully helped to see it all together in a single video.